Hello, I'm Logic Bunny, and come with me down the rabbit hole of knowledge.
Have you ever stood before something incredibly vast, like a towering mountain or an endless ocean, and felt a quiet, almost unsettling wonder about its story? How did it get there? What forces shaped it? What if we applied that same quiet wonder to something as immense as an empire, a civilization that once stretched across the known world? We hear about the fall of Rome, and it sounds so final, so absolute, like a single, sudden event. But what does that truly mean? How does something so powerful, so seemingly eternal, simply crumble? It can feel overwhelming, like trying to understand a massive, intricate machine when you only see a few gears turning. This feeling, this struggle to grasp the how and why behind such a colossal event, is a valid one. Sometimes, when we look at history, it can feel like a jumbled, dusty attic full of names and dates that don't quite connect, leaving us feeling lost in a sea of facts without understanding the deeper currents. This is where the spirit of inquiry, the human ingenuity to question and explore, becomes our compass. Imagine a magnificent bridge built with incredible ingenuity, strong and proud for centuries. But beneath the surface, tiny cracks begin to form, almost invisible at first. Not from a sudden earthquake, but from the constant, subtle pressures of its own weight, the flow of the river beneath, the very materials it's made from. Empires, in a way, are like those bridges. They are not just armies and emperors. They are vast, living systems held together by countless threads, many of them unseen, many of them economic. Today, we're not just going to skim the surface of history books. We're going to dive deep with the spirit of a true explorer into the very veins of the Roman Empire, its economy. We are going to uncover the logic, the natural laws, and the universal principles that govern not just the stars, but also the rise and fall of civilizations. Just as a scientist observes the subtle changes in an ecosystem to understand its health, or an engineer examines the stresses on a structure, we will look at the invisible forces that shaped Rome. Think of it like discerning the underlying currents in a vast ocean. They are not always visible on the surface, but they dictate the movement of everything within. Understanding these principles, these economic forces, makes the complex story of Rome's decline not just clear, but profoundly illuminating. What if the true story of Rome's fall isn't a simple tale of invaders, but a profound lesson in how the very way a society manages its resources, its wealth, and its people can determine its destiny? Prepare to have your mind blown. Are you ready to uncover the hidden economic truths that whispered the end for an empire? Imagine holding a coin, trusting its value, knowing it will buy what you expect. Now, what if that coin suddenly bought half as much? This silent frustration, this loss of trust began to unravel the Roman Empire. It wasn't a sudden invasion, but a creeping doubt, a fake gold glitch that weakened the very foundation of daily life. Emperors, facing the crushing cost of armies, roads, and a vast government, started to debase their coins. They melted down silver coins, adding cheaper metals like copper. It was like stretching a small amount of precious metal to make it look like more, but its true power was quietly draining away. There was a common distortion, a myth that an empire so vast must have endless riches. But the logical truth was that maintaining such an immense structure came with an astronomical price tag. Without sustainable new income, the empire was like a magnificent ship with a constantly leaking hull. Emperors tried to pour more water into the bucket by minting more coins, but if those coins held less actual silver, they were essentially printing fake gold, accelerating the problem. The consequence was a shocking wave of hyperinflation. Imagine waking up to find a loaf of bread cost a fortune, while your wages stayed the same. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a crushing reality that swept away savings and plunged citizens into widespread anxiety. What if your money kept shrinking in value every day? Would you save it or spend it immediately before it lost even more worth? This explains the desperate scramble of Roman citizens, trying to make sense of a world where their wealth evaporated like morning mist. An empire's economy, in this way, is like a giant bucket. If you keep pouring water, new money into it, but there's a huge hole at the bottom from debasement and unsustainable spending, the bucket will never truly fill. Eventually, it will run dry, no matter how much you add. This leaky bucket, this silent saboteur, was one of the most powerful forces that made the mighty Roman Empire decline from within. What happens to a society when the very foundation of its value becomes uncertain? Have you ever felt stretched to thin, like trying to hold on to too many things at once, and suddenly everything feels heavier, harder to manage? There's a quiet ache that comes with being overwhelmed, a sense that the very scale of something can become its undoing. For Rome, its immense size, once its greatest strength, slowly became a source of deep internal sickness. It's a profound lesson in the delicate balance of growth and sustainability. Imagine trying to deliver supplies, not just across a city, but across continents, feeding and equipping legions of soldiers stationed thousands of miles from home. This was Rome's marathon supply line, a logistical nightmare that silently drained its core resources. Every sack of grain, every weapon, every coin sent to a distant frontier pulled vital energy from the heart of the empire. It was like trying to deliver pizza to the moon, a constant, exhausting effort where the distance itself was the enemy, making everything slower, more expensive, and impossibly complex. There was a common distortion, a myth that a central government could effectively manage every single corner of such a vast empire without local corruption or rebellion. This led to unrealistic expectations, fostering a sense of disengagement as distant provinces felt less connected, less controlled. This wasn't merely a matter of bad management. It was a fundamental challenge of scale, a natural law of administration. The more land, less control paradox began to shatter the expectation that conquering more territory always strengthened the empire. Instead, overextension stretched its resources thin, leaving its borders vulnerable and sparking internal revolts. Rome became more brittle, not stronger, with each new conquest. Think of it like trying to manage a social media group with millions of members from dozens of different countries, all with unique needs and languages. How do you keep everyone happy, informed, and united without chaos? That was Rome's challenge, but with real armies, real taxes, and real consequences. The empire was like an intricate spider web. The bigger it grew, the more intricate and far-reaching its threads became. But if the web stretched too far, the threads themselves became thin, weak, and easily broken by any small disturbance. This strain, this fundamental overstretch, made Rome sick from its own vastness. What happens when the very ambition that builds an empire also starts to tear it apart? Have you ever felt the sting of unfairness, watching some thrive effortlessly while others struggle, despite their best efforts? There's a deep, quiet frustration that settles in when the rules of the game seem rigged, when the very fabric of society feels torn. For Rome, this wasn't just a feeling, it was a growing chasm, a profound fault line between two distinct realities, the ultra-rich and the struggling poor. The wealthy often avoided taxes and hoarded vast stretches of land, while the immense burden of supporting the empire fell heavily upon the shoulders of ordinary citizens, many of whom lost their small farms and livelihoods. This created a deep, gnawing resentment, a silent saboteur that eroded the very soul of the empire. There was a common distortion, a myth that a powerful empire automatically benefits all its citizens equally, spreading prosperity like a warm summer breeze. But the logical truth was far different. Extreme wealth concentration and widespread poverty masked the reality, stifling any sense of collective purpose or shared destiny. It was a cruel illusion, where the glittering facade of imperial might hit a festering wound within. The no middle class collapse shattered the expectation realization that a stable society could exist without a strong, vibrant core. As small farmers and artisans disappeared, the economic backbone of Rome fractured, leaving only extremes that clashed violently, unable to find common ground. Imagine a game, an economic ladder game, where only the top 1% could ever truly win, and everyone else was stuck, unable to climb, watching their dreams fade. How long before players quit in despair, or perhaps try to flip the entire board in frustration? This practical transformation illustrates the Roman social breakdown, a profound unraveling of community and shared fate. Society, in its delicate balance, is truly like a scale. If one side, the rich, gets to heavy with unchecked power and wealth, and the other, the poor, gets to light with increasing burdens and diminishing hope, the entire structure becomes unstable. Eventually, it tips over, crashing down under the weight of its own imbalance. What happens to a civilization when its own people are pulled so far apart they can no longer see each other? Have you ever felt the quiet stillness when a brilliant idea, a spark of curiosity, just doesn't ignite? Or when a problem arises and instead of seeking a new solution, everyone just relies on the old, familiar way, even if it's less efficient? For Rome, a civilization renowned for its engineering marvels, a different kind of challenge emerged. A profound brain drain, an economic reason why the wellspring of innovation began to slow, then stagnate. This wasn't about a lack of intelligence. It was about a subtle, insidious trap that stifled the very spirit of invention. The slave labor trap was a silent frustration, a deep current flowing beneath Roman society. Because vast numbers of slaves performed most of the manual work, there was less economic incentive for Roman innovators to develop labor-saving technologies or improve production efficiency. Why invest time and resources in inventing a complex machine to lift heavy stones or harvest crops when a seemingly endless supply of cheap human labor was readily available? This created a profound no-profit in progress paradox. The common distortion was that a great civilization would always be at the forefront of innovation, constantly pushing boundaries. But the logical truth revealed that economic structures, like a lack of patent protection or a dominant focus on military conquest over industrial development, meant there was little financial reward for new inventions in many crucial sectors. The motivation, the spark that fuels human ingenuity, simply wasn't there in the same way. Consider this problem-solving challenge. If you have a problem, a need for something to be done, but someone else will always solve it for you, for free or for very little cost, do you truly learn to solve it yourself? Do you push your mind to find a better, more efficient way? This practical transformation explains why Roman innovation, particularly in areas that would have revolutionized industry, gradually stagnated. An empire's progress is much like a machine. If you don't continually oil its gears, investing in new ideas, and replace its worn parts with fresh innovations, it will eventually grind to a halt and rust. It becomes unable to keep up with new challenges, unable to adapt, slowly losing its momentum. What happens when a society, once so brilliant, loses the economic drive to dream of new ways to build, to create, to advance? Have you ever felt that sudden, unsettling jolt when something you rely on every single day, something you take for granted, is suddenly gone or impossible to get? There's a quiet anxiety that settles in when the flow of life's necessities is disrupted, making everything feel uncertain. For Rome, a vast empire that connected so much of the ancient world, this feeling became a devastating reality, a profound supply chain shock that exposed a deep vulnerability. Imagine the empire as a living body, its trade routes like vital veins and arteries, carrying the very blood of resources and wealth to all its parts. The blocked artery problem was a silent frustration, as barbarian incursions on land and rampant piracy at sea began began to disrupt these crucial pathways. Essential goods like grain from Egypt to feed its massive cities or iron for its formidable armies became expensive, scarce, or even impossible to get. The empire's cities and legions, once robust, began to slowly starve, not just of food, but of the very materials that fueled their might. There was a common distortion, a myth that a large, powerful empire could always provide everything for itself, standing self-sufficient and independent. But the logical truth was that Rome, despite its vastness, was deeply reliant on complex and often vulnerable trade networks. The no-silk, no-soldiers ripple effect shattered the expectation that trade was just about luxury goods. When disruptions cut off access to everyday necessities and strategic materials like the metals needed for weapons, it didn't just mean fewer fancy garments. It weakened Rome's military, crippled its economy, and created a domino effect of decline. Think of it like a long line of dominoes, each one representing a crucial trade route or an essential resource. What happens if just one in the middle falls? It's not just that one domino. The whole chain, the entire interconnected system, can collapse. This practical transformation illustrates the profound fragility of Rome's global trade. When these vital routes were cut or blocked, the body of the empire slowly starved and weakened, unable to sustain itself, eventually collapsing under the weight of its own interconnectedness. What happens to a mighty civilization when the invisible threads that bind it to the world begin to fray and snap? Reflecting on the vastness of history, have you ever felt a quiet ache, a sense of being lost in a sea of dates and names, wondering if you'll ever truly grasp the why behind it all? It can feel like looking at a complex machine and only seeing the outside, never truly understanding the intricate gears within. This feeling, this quiet struggle to connect with the deep currents of the past, is a valid one. But what if we told you that the story of Rome's fall isn't just about battles and emperors, but a profound lesson in the invisible forces, the economic pulses that beat within every civilization? Rome didn't just fall in one dramatic, sudden battle, like a single, devastating blow. Instead, it was a slow, agonizing economic erosion, much like a magnificent ship taking on water from 1,000 tiny, unseen leaks. Each leak, debased currency, overstretched supply lines, widening inequality, and stifled innovation, seemed small on its own, but together they relentlessly dragged the empire down. Understanding this transforms what might seem like a confusing, jumbled historical event into a clear, logical story, almost like watching a time lapse of a mountain slowly eroding over millennia. Just as figures like Ibarra the Norio from Manuel du Mundo show us that even simple experiments have many variables, Rome's decline wasn't due to a single cause. It was a complex interplay of these economic forces, a delicate web where one strain affected another. This isn't just about memorizing facts or dates. It's about discerning the underlying logic and principles governing human societies, understanding the mechanisms behind intriguing, world-shaping phenomena. It's about seeing history not as a finished book, but as a living laboratory of cause and effect. And here's the mind-blowing part. These economic lessons about inflation, the dangers of extreme inequality, the fragility of global supply chains, and the need for innovation are not just ancient history. They are still playing out today, all around us. Developing this kind of critical thinking, this ability to look beneath the surface, helps you truly understand the world around you, giving you the power to question and explore. Don't ever feel silly or dumb for asking why something happened, or for wanting to dig deeper than the surface level explanations. True curiosity, the spirit of inquiry, is the most powerful tool you possess. It's what allows you to spark your own understanding, to turn complex topics into exhilarating adventures, and to find the wisdom hidden in plain sight. So, let's make a quiet promise to ourselves, to look at the world, both past and present, with new eyes, to seek out the hidden economic currents, the subtle forces that shape our lives, and the grand narratives of human history. What if, by truly understanding the silent whispers of economics in Rome, we gain the foresight to navigate the challenges of our own time? Stay curious.